With Hall of Fame boxing promoter Frank Warren. Frank, how are we?
I'm okay. What about you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I came in this morning. I was expecting to see meetings with you, Eddie, George, all talking about how Joshua Fury's next. Is that not what's going on?
Obviously not. You didn't see him, did you? So it won't happen. Tyson's on a break at the moment. He's in Italy, so I'm not even troubling him about anything.
Mm-hmm. But what did you make of Joshua's return at the weekend? It was a decision win over Jermaine Franklin. I assume you watched it. Give us your thoughts.
Well, I expected him to win the fight, and he did win it. And, I thought he'd done it quite tentatively, but he'd done what he had to do, which was to get the result. Did
you see improvements?
Look, he's 33 years of age. He's not some youngster on the way up. You can see, look, when somebody suffers defeats, that affects their confidence, and he's got to rebuild his confidence. And I think that fight for him was a fight that is supposed to help with his confidence. But it's no good for them to keep talking about more warm-up fights. As I say, he's 33 years of age. He's a former world champion. He's a world champion for what, 8 years, 8 years. So he's not some novice or anything.
Well, do you think it did help with his confidence? You said there that it was a fight that was supposed to help his confidence. I guess the boxing world was supposed to be, everyone should be talking about, we want to see him now against Fury, we want to see him against Wilder. We should have been excited for that. Do you think it helped his confidence and got him ready for those fights?
Well, the thing about it is either, is he ready for him? If he ain't ready now, he's never going to be ready. As I've said, I'm just going to be repeating myself. He's 33 years of age. I mean, that's the level he's fought at. He's fought at world championship level. And if he wants to, and it's a big if, whether the fight happens with Tyson, but if it did happen, then he'd have to be ready. It's as simple as that. He'll have to be ready. He'll have to go there, get in the ring with him. If it was Tyson, if it was Usyk, if it's Wilder, whoever he fights next, he's going to have to be ready because they'll be coming to take his head off.
Some people, I think Dave Caldwell, a few others have said that it was perhaps a bit sad to watch, and it wasn't like the old Anthony Joshua that we used to see. Would you agree with that?
Well, he's not the old Anthony Joshua. He's been beaten 3 times in the last, couple of years, 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, in world title fights. He's a different Anthony Joshua, but he's an Anthony Joshua who's got experience, who's fought at that level, and he's an Anthony Joshua. If he has any ambition fighting for a world title, he's going to have to get in there, and he's going to have to give it all. As I say, he's a lot of big punchers when they get. If they get stopped or they get hurt in fights, a lot of big punchers change their style. Where you see him, for example, with AJ, he throws big right hands, but it seems as he throws it, he's pulling it back. And the reason you do that, because as you're throwing the right, if you're letting your hands really go, you're then exposing your chin. But if you're throwing it and pulling back at the same time, you're not leaving yourself exposed. So it's whether he's got the confidence in him now, whether he feels that he can let those shots go, because that's where he's where his best moves are, and is in his arsenal. So he's got to get his jab going. Like all good fighters, you have a good jab, and he has to let his right hand go. But once he lets that right hand go, he exposes himself, and it's whether he feels he wants to do that.
Do you think maybe it's a mental thing then, for when he has exposed himself in the past and he's been punished for it? Is it all in his head?
It happens with lots of fighters. There are a lot of fighters that are like that. You see guys, especially guys that are big punchers, who are knocking everybody out, knocking everybody over on the way up, and suddenly they start going the distance with guys because they're meeting a better quality fighter, they're meeting more experienced fighters, and it changes a bit. And then obviously you have to adapt. Some have to adapt their style. I mean, you look at Tyson. He stops a lot of people, Tyson, but he's poleaxing them because he's changed. He's changed, but he's gone in a different way. He's actually going out there and he's planting his feet and letting them go and trading with people.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, you mentioned Tyson there, and at the top of the interview, you said he's having a bit of a rest at the moment. What is the current kind of situation, and when can we expect to see him back? What's your thoughts on it?
I haven't got any thoughts till I speak with him. Mm-hmm. Until I speak with him, there's nothing to say. I'm not going to be even throwing anything out there for people to sort of start, the haters or people to throw criticism. Until he says what he wants to do, then nothing's happening. That's it. Would I like to see him fight again? Of course I would, because I think he's at the peak of his powers, and I think he's the best heavyweight out there, and I think he beats everybody. But he's the one who has to make the decision.
Do you expect Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and Anthony Joshua to pursue a fight with Tyson Fury next? That was a lot of the talk pre-Jermaine Franklin was, once we come through this, we could talk to the Warrens about doing a fight with Fury in the summer. From their end, I know what you've said about Tyson, but from their end, do you expect them to pursue that fight?
They can't pursue anything until Tyson wants to do it. I mean, it's funny how the world turns round. And I look back a few years ago, I remember Barry Hearn on radio, both of us on a radio station, and I remember him saying that he's not going to conduct negotiations over the radio, and he also was saying that what does AJ need to fight Tyson Fury for? I can remember his exact words. He's basically saying he's a cash cow, and he can fight anybody. Well, that's not happening now, and the fans obviously want and expect more. Although Barry Hearn was saying that he didn't want the fight. The interview somebody showed me this morning, he said he didn't want the fight over the weekend. So I don't know whether that's true or not. But look, the only person who's going to determine whether that fight goes on is the champion, is the undefeated WBC champion, and that's Tyson Fury.
Well, there was talk of Tyson in the build-up. There was also talk of Wilder, but also talk of Joe Joyce. And Anthony Joshua highlighted Joe Joyce as somebody that he wanted to fight within his next few fights before he retires. What's your reaction to that?
Well, Joe's got a really tough fight against Yang on the 15th at Copperbox. That is a really good quality heavyweight fight. I think Zhang's a better opponent than Franklin is. In my opinion. So I think you're going to get something a little bit special on the night with them. And I expect Joe to come through in a tough fight. And Joe fight anybody. He's ready to go. He'll fight. I mean, they want to pick up the phone and talk to us about that. We'll do that immediately. Joe comes through. Remember, Joe's the interim champion, so he's the gatekeeper to the mandatory WBO mandatory. He is the gatekeeper for that fight. So if anybody wants it, they know what they've got to do. They've got to fight him. And if Joshua wants to get himself into that position, we'd gladly accommodate him for that. I can speak on behalf of Joe because Joe's told me he wants to fight.
Do you think for Joshua it's a more appealing fight than Dillian Whyte?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. It's a much bigger fight, much bigger money fight. Although I like the Dillian Whyte fight for Joe as well, but it's a much bigger fight. He's fighting a former world champion, and in a fight that a lot of people will think he'll have a good chance of winning, including myself.
So I meant in terms of to Anthony Joshua, say he's got the options on the table of Dillian Whyte next or Joe Joyce next. What would be the
no-brainer, isn't it? I mean, that's a no-brainer, that fight. Joe Joyce is undefeated as a heavyweight, and as I've just said, he's the interim champion. Mm-hmm. He's the number one. He's the gatekeeper for the WBO title. And if Usyk vacates that title, then Joe becomes champion.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of mandatories, and it's Daniel Dubois next in line for Oleksandr Usyk. What's the latest with that? The last that we heard publicly was that the WBA were asking for a kind of a doctor's note declaring that Daniel Dubois is fit. What can you tell us?
They've got the doctor's note declaring he's okay to go into training. And he's got to train for the fight. He's not fit to fight today because obviously he's got to train for a fight. So, but by the time the fight comes round, he'll be ready to go. And he wants to fight, and I want the fight for him. I think it's a winnable fight. It's funny. I look at that fight on Saturday, and I look at the two Usyk fights that AJ had, and it takes a bit of the gloss off of the win of Usyk, in my opinion. And I feel that I think they're underestimate Daniel. And I hope they do. They're underestimated, but they'll be in for a shock. If he catches him, he will go.
What do you think Dubois can do in there that Anthony Joshua didn't do over 24 rounds?
I think he's got a great jab. I think he's a much bigger puncher, more hurtful puncher, and he's a younger man. And
the sort of conversations that you've had with him, he's ready to go and he thinks he can win that fight.
He wants it. He's very keen. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we had a lunch with the press. He came along to it, and he was really up and for it. I mean, he's had a couple of fights he's had, the one with Joyce was a weird situation, and Joe done what he had to do and come through it, and that was a bit of a bad injury that he got in that fight, but he's had an operation over it. And that last fight, when he got clipped on the top, he got caught with a good shot on the top of the head, and I've seen lots of fighters not get through fights being caught like that, and he gritted his teeth and he tore his ligament in his leg, which he's had to have the operation on, but he gritted his teeth and he came back and he showed something to me in that fight. And he destroyed him at the end. I mean, he hit him with really good shots, the South African. And I don't care. If he catches somebody, they'll go. And I think Joe himself said he's the hardest he's ever been hit was by Daniel. And there's a big fight between them two as well down the line. Big fight with them, big rematch. Be a great fight.
Could have a lot of belts on the line when they two fight again.
Well, they're the next guys. They're the next guys in line, aren't they? They're the ones coming through. They're there. They're in great positions. We work very hard to get them into the slots they're in, and they're ready to go. They're ready to take advantage of that. It's just a shame we didn't get the fight on with Tyson and Usyk, but that's yesterday's news. There's no point going on about it. But I want to, I think, but the key for us, as to all what's going to happen and who's going to fight who, is what Tyson wants to do. Because at the end of the day, he's in the driving seat.
And with regards to Usyk and Dubois, conversations, it sounds like conversations have started. Are we looking at a UK fight? Do you think we'll get a deal done? Will it go to purse bids? What's your feeling?
Don't know yet, but as soon as we find out, we're making an announcement. We're negotiating, and we'll see where we go with it. But the negotiations have started.
There were whispers going around about Usyk perhaps fighting Deontay Wilder, and a big fight that could be out there for him. And recently we've just seen Deontay Wilder leapfrog Martin Bakole in the WBA rankings. Are you aware of that, and what are your thoughts on that fight?
Well, it doesn't matter where he's leaped or whatever. The mandatory is Daniel, and that's it. And we Daniel wants that fight, and that's where we're at.
Back to Joyce, April 15th. Does he need to make a big statement? Does he need to knock out Zhilei Zhang, beat his chest and say, I'm here, I'm the juggernaut?
I think he'd done that in his last fight he stopped a world champion who'd never been stopped before. Mm-hmm. That was a big statement last time out, and he looked brilliant. You've got to take your hat off to him. He didn't need to take a tough guy like this. In fact, he's in that position. He's got that mandatory slot there, or spot, and he could have had a marking time fight, but he's not done that. He said, he wants to fight a real live opponent. We all see that Zhang is a live opponent when he fought Hrgovic, who's now the number one mandatory for the IBF to Usyk, and I thought he won that fight. I've got to be honest, I've not spoken to anybody who thought Hrgovic won the fight other than his promoters and Hrgovic. Yeah. Everybody else thought he got beat. So that tells you a lot about Joyce.
Is Joyce the biggest threat to the heavyweight throne?
A lot of people seem to think so because they don't want to fight him. So that's where it's at. But look, let's get that fight away on the 15th. I mean, you don't want to be counting our chickens there. I want to, just want him to come through that fight, look good doing it, and then we can sit back and then make the necessary moves for him. He's got a great team around him. He's got a good trainer, really good trainer, and he's got a good manager. In Adam, they've done a fantastic job with him. And as far as I'm concerned, he thoroughly deserves to be where he is because he's worked hard at it, and he's a really nice guy.
He's a super nice guy. Look, and you mentioned there how if Anthony Joshua's team did want to pursue a fight with Joyce, it's a very easy conversation for you. How do you see that fight playing out?
What, with Anthony Joshua and Joe? I think Joyce will knock him out.
Early, late?
As soon as he catches him, he will walk through him. And the interesting thing about all this, they can look at all these old videos and dig up all this old crap from the past, and they need to keep looking at it because that will hopefully give them some confidence. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, when we get down to the professional boxing, when we get down to that, we look at improvement, because that's what you were speaking, how we started this conversation, about was there an improvement in AJ? No, there hasn't been an improvement in him, but there's definitely been an improvement in Joyce.
Do you think like the best is still yet to come? Even though Joyce is advancing in years, is older than Anthony Joshua, we're still not...
He's like a fine wine. And that's what he is, and he's maturing really well, and there's a lot in the tank. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, a couple of fights when I see him in the early days, and up until a couple of years ago, where he was taking some shots. Sometimes I'm thinking, I'm sitting there going, oh, but he walks through here, take that shot to go and land 2 or 3 of his own. And I know with some of these fights that he's had, they've taken the shot, he's taken their shots, and it's like taking a lot out of them, seeing he's taken it. It's a bit heartbreaking, you know what I mean? But he's come on, and he's got a good jab, and he's faster than he looks. And that last fight I thought was a great heavyweight fight last year. It really was a good fight to watch. Really, really good fight.
Look, you say about him taking those shots, but you don't want to be taking shots like that from Anthony Joshua, right?
Well, you don't want to be taking shots from... Of course you don't want to be taking shots from any heavyweights, these big guys who throw big punches. But AJ don't want to be taking his shots.
Well, look, sticking with the heavyweights, our man David Adeleye rocked up at the DAZN press conference last week for Joshua, had a little run-in with Fabio Wardley. What did you make of that?
I think it's all good. It sets that fight up. I mean, it's another... I mean, we're blessed, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Britain, heavyweight division. I mean, my God, we're flying, and I think that fight again is a really good fight for those two guys. David's with us, so obviously I fancy David to win the fight. But I think it's a good fight for them, the fighters, and it's certainly a good fight for the fans. And the winner, it'll set them up lovely. And it's not the end of the world for the loser. There's a lot of good fights out there. We're blessed with heavyweights, and we've got our youngsters having a fight as well. Near Moses is out again. And I'm sure he'll be looking to make an impression, see if he can get someone to take him past 40 seconds.
Fingers crossed, because we want to see more of Moses.
Look, he will. Look, I'll be really honest here. He's turned 18, a couple of months ago?
January.
He's a baby, he's turned 18. And those... our job is to make fights and see if we can, try and get him improve him each time. And he's done what he's had to do. We had to get a last one, get a replacement in because of a last minute. But he's done what he's had to do. He's very disappointed. I mean, he wants to go and fight for the British title tomorrow. And that would be fantastic. I mean, that would sell like hotcakes, wouldn't it? But the name of the game at the moment is to learn your trade, a little bit of patience, and that's for everybody watching it as well. And let's see where we go by the end of the year. Because I hope by the end of the year, he's had 8-10 fights under his belt, which could be a lot of fights for him. But get them under his belt, and I think he'd be fighting for a British title by then.
Well, back to David Adeleye, who is interested in the British title, and Fabio Wardley has named him as one of the opponents he could fight for a British title. How do you expect this to play out? Do you think the board could mandate David Adeleye for that title?
Well, they should do. There isn't anybody else.
Well, they've talked about Fraser Clark and Solomon Dakers over at Matchroom.
They can talk about it, but at the end of the day, Dave, how many fights has Fraser had?
So both Dakers and Clark are 6-0.
Yeah, well, he's 10-0, isn't he? Coming up to 11-0? 11-0, so he should get in there. He should be in there first. Let me tell you something. I'll tell you what we'd do with him. The board, I hope the board do mandate it, and then go and make the Fraser Clark fight. I'd make that. Mm-hmm. I have no problem with that for David. None at all. I'd go with that. Make the fight with Wardley, and then he can defend against Fraser Clark.
Okay.
I have no problem with that at all. No problem.
Good fights out there for David Adeleye. Just want to get your thoughts on a couple more things. Gareth A. Davis tried to interview Conor Benn at the weekend, and he slapped his mic away. Did you see the video? And what did you think?
I have no interest in it. I have zero interest in that. Do you know what? I don't want to talk about the fighters. Yeah. And Conor Benn at the moment isn't a British licence holder. He's not a fighter at the moment. Go and get your licence back, Conor, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, two British licence holders are Liam Davis and Dennis McCann, and they have interacted across social media. McCann's saying, I would knock you out. Liam Davis is saying, you're being kind of mollycoddled by Queensberry and I'm not allowed to talk about you. These sorts of conversations are happening. Can we see this fight this year? What do you think?
Well, I don't know about mollycoddled. They are talking about it, aren't they? So that's it. I think it's a big fight this year. No doubt about that. That's a big fight this year. Big fight to make, yeah.
Well, Liam Davis is the Telford hero. Let me just reflect on the Telford show from the other week. Nathan Heaney he seems to have more fans than ever. He seems to be boxing better than ever for me. What did you think?
I think I agree with both of that. I mean, the fans thing is brilliant because of the atmosphere it brings, and I mean, they obviously love him, and they love him because he's a nice guy. He's a real decent person, and that's lovely. But he's looking good in the ring. He's getting better and better every fight. He shapes up well. He's looking the business, and I want to get him a title fight. It's a shame that we was all working hard to get him on a fight on at Stoke City, but unfortunately they're having a lot of improvements done to their ground, so we can't do that in the summer. But I want to get him out there, and I will do. I'll get him out there in a bit. He will get a title fight.
That'll be music to his ears. That music will probably be Delilah. It was good to see Delilah.
And we should all keep singing Delilah. I'm a Delilah man.
Andrew Kane,
no jiggery wokery on our shows.
Jiggery wokery. Andrew Kane, Yonut Baluta. What did you think? It was a hell of a fight, just seeing it.
It was a great fight. It was a very competitive fight. It was a great fight. And I'm going to take my head off to Baluta, but I thought Andrew won that fight. I thought the referee missed a knockdown, and I think he spat his gum shield out, at least 3 times. And for that, you normally get a point taken away. But irrespective of that, I don't want to take... I thought he won the fight. I thought he was in front. I thought he won the fight. But that's another rematch we can make. That's a great rematch. You know, Andrew should take a lot away from that, as the other guy as well. But he busted his hand up, so we got fight. I'm still actually waiting to find out what's happened with that from Paul Stevenson, his trainer. But he did bust his hand up. But that was a really, really good fight. That's up there as a contender for Fight of the Year.
It was very good indeed. I'll tell you who else stood out on the undercard. It was in the non-televised portion, but he seems to be making a little bit of noise. Is light heavyweight Ezra Taylor, who seems to look the part and hit people. Hit people very hard. A word on Ezra Taylor from you.
Well, everybody keeps saying to me about Ezra and how well he does, especially on that show. And he will be next show he's on. He'll be televised, guaranteed.
Okay, because I think he's must watch.
Good. Well, then you'll be able to watch him on television, won't you?
I look forward to it. Frank, final one. Joe Joyce, Zhilei Zhang, April 15th. Do you want to tell them why they should be watching it?
It's a proper heavyweight fight. They both got impeccable amateur background, different Olympics, but both silver medalists. And as heavyweights professionally, this couldn't be a better matchup. This is a real fight. Two live fighters in with each other, 2 similar styles. All you're going to get is a war.
Thank you, Frank Warren.
Pleasure.
Cheers.